Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming back to the Dalten Collective Weekly Hangout. So we've got some cool updates for today. So Rabsif, why don't you take it away and give everybody the update from last week?
Yeah, so we have officially submitted an incorporation request to the state of Delaware. It's a handsome face. You don't need to get rid of it. But to the state of Delaware, and we are seeking incorporation under the name SIG Dalten Collective Inc. If they don't let us use the SIG at the beginning, we're going to go with Dalten Collective Inc. And I'll show you what we have for the status right now. I just want to make sure it doesn't divulge any private information. Okay, it doesn't. So Chrome tab.
Oh, yeah, that's
right.
We
want it to be this guy here. Okay, so you should be seeing it now.
Presenting. Yeah, I see it.
Okay, and so right now we're doing the name check. A couple of notes on incorporation in Delaware. They wanted to know the business that we were providing, and they wanted to know the rationale for the name. So for the rationale for the name, we said it was a collective entity centered around the Urbit star property Dalten. For the business purpose, I said that we were developing software for the Urbit platform, and then also like facilitating skill development in that pursuit amongst the team, the collective membership. The current ownership of the company is across the 5 multi-sig members, 1,000 shares each at a par value of 1/10 of a cent. So for $1, I think, is what that equals out to for each person. And we have all these multi-sig members contributed. And Kenny, don't take this as an insult, but we've all contributed in sweat equity $1 of value to the company. So right now it's worth $5, and we have 5,000 shares of stock, each at a par value of 0.1 cent.
Excellent.
So we should have it done by the end of the month, effectively. Oh, the other thing, Kenny, you're the president. I've labeled myself as the treasurer and secretary. There's some responsibilities that come into that, like taking organizational meeting notes and that sort of thing, and then also keeping our books. I'll handle the keeping of the books, and then we should probably take meeting minutes whenever we have these meetings, or at least designate some of them as official
corporate meetings.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, so we can do that. So what does this allow us to do, legally speaking?
Well, from here we can form bylaws that structure how the company remunerates its various team members, and it allows us to also have ownership of property at a corporate level. So, like, I wanted to gift one of my stars to the organization so we could start selling planets, potentially under Christian Your Solution that you've been working on. But however we want to do it, we can put that. We don't have to own it under the multi-sig. We can just own it as the corporation and have an ETH identity that's owned by the corporation, and that's that sort of thing. So possession, tax filing, and tax status. If we want to employ people, we will have to get an EIN, which is going to be an additional cost and that sort of thing. But this does allow us to get started down the path of being a legitimate entity.
Excellent. Very cool. Thank you for that update.
My pleasure.
So I also have some updates. So in our last meeting, we had some takeaways, and one of my takeaways was to do some investigation on sort of like DAO frameworks, or smart contract frameworks is probably a better way to say it, for collective organization. And so there's 3 options that I had sort of landed on as wanting to present. So I will go ahead and share my screen now too. But these are mostly just it's mostly just websites that I've been going to here. So just a minute. All right. So you should see. Let's see. This should be DAO Stack. Yeah. Okay. So DAO Stack here is they provide a set of smart contracts for doing decentralized autonomous organizations, that sort of thing. But this also comes with their own interface, which means they have like a web front end that you can control these smart contracts with. And they also have some basic levels of reputation and, sort of different levels in this stack of things that you might want to use. Probably a lot of voting as well. And I do know that the DXDAO uses this, which is, I think, also Deorg here. So these, what was that?
Deorg and DXDAO are not the same.
They are not the same, but Deorg here is at least listed. But I think they do use the same framework, though, right?
Yeah.
So we do know some people that have used it. It has probably, its own positives and negatives. So, yeah.
One thing I can briefly say is that, this probably is the case for all the other options you're about to list, or like equally similar. But a proposal now, I remember when it was like $2.
Yeah.
Share. Now, Jordan spent $70 to make a proposal, boost the proposal, and vote on it.
Yeah.
Which is just utterly egregious.
Yeah, all smart contracting sort of governance platforms are experiencing the same issue.
But what we did, and this is like an option for us, is we're moving to the XDAI sidechain. It's like a proof of authority sidechain that like links up with Ethereum, and so you can like migrate tokens from XDAI and onto Ethereum and back.
Yes, which is also very cool, by the way. All right, so the next option would be Aragon, which is, they've got sort of these two basic, this is just like the created DAO thing, but here's like a blank DAO. And this is also going in through a like a .eth address. Like you could actually register these names on Ethereum, tokens and voting and finance and payments and these kinds of things. So very much structured as a sort of a business, a quasi business entity where you'd be wanting to keep track of lots of different things. And again, using their smart contracts, which have been audited, which is good, and their own front ends, which I would hope that you could probably fork these, but I haven't looked deeply enough into this to see if that's truly the case.
Yeah, you can. I've done a little bit, and they also support like something similar to DAO Stack's generic action scheme. They call it agents.
Yeah. Okay, last and most esoteric would be a Moloch DAO, which would be a Moloch DAO is sort of like a minimally viable platform for making decisions on things. Also related to structured around voting and proposals, that kind of thing. Similar to what Christian said, it's become very expensive to do this, but not prohibitively so. Nothing like $70. It's, I think the last time I saw a proposal go up on a Moloch DAO was something like $10, and each individual paid like $2 to $3 to vote. But in here, this has a basic idea of shares. So there would be shares in proportional to whatever you put in for in resources in these. These are usually sort of meant for doing funding of some kind, usually. And then there's proposals, and proposals can be voted on. And in here, you can rage quit at any time as well. So you can get out. But the version 2 also allows something called the guild kick, which you can sort of, the group can decide to remove somebody. So those are the three that I'm most familiar with in terms of, I use Moloch for Metacartel Ventures. So I'm somewhat familiar with that. There's a few interfaces that sort of you can use. I've never used an Aragon DAO, but I am familiar with them, and I did some early advising for them a long time ago. And yeah, I know people who use DAO Stack, so I've never used it before. So those are some of the options for, I guess you'd say, sort of like DAO frameworks. And I think, though, we should be really tight in on what we might want to use these things for. If it's just asset management, that sort of thing, that's sort of one realm. But if we also want to go down the realm of like voting, I think that might be something that's more appropriate at a possibly a smaller scale, but I think voting on a lot of different proposals would kind of slow us down a bit. And yeah, and maybe not a total voting kind of structures. I don't think exactly what Dalton should be striving for, but certainly collective oversight is something we should be looking for.
Yeah. I just wish I had more time because I can envision some Urbit apps that would also function.
Well, and then we can get to that later. Meaning that's probably one of those things that we'll need the most sort of help with is direction and like creation of teams to work on things. Is my guess, because there's probably always going to be things to work on.
Oh yes.
Cool. Well, with that though, since we're not in any immediate need of DAO frameworks to like manage our day-to-days, especially since we are making some progress on the legal front, what I would suggest that we do is continue with the multi-sig for now, and as soon as it's kind of more apparent that we've outgrown that solution, come back to this with some more sort of concrete like needs. But but specifically now going back to the idea of creating this trust metric and at least piloting it out on ourselves, and then potentially seeing what that could be used for the rest of Urbit, I think is also something we should put more time and effort into. So on that, so I've been in communication with Dan Connolly, and he has generally said that he's available sort of like Saturday mornings in Central Time to do these sort of side projects that he works on from time to time. And so last meeting we had, so Rabs, if you were interested, Phonics, you were interested, I'm also interested, and I think Rapfer, you are also interested in looking at this Python implementation of the trust metric and seeing what it might take to port over. Is that still correct, generally speaking? Cool.
Yeah, I would say so. Just testing that you can hear me.
Yes, Phonics, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
And I think like and sometime in the morning there wouldn't be too bad for the UK time period either, right? That's like early afternoon for you, mid-afternoon?
Yeah, that would be a perfect time for me, yes.
Okay, so I'll propose a 9 a.m. Pacific time meeting with Dan Connolly this Saturday. So for, I think, Reps, I think that's 10 your time, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I think he's also 10. I think for everybody else, that's sort of mixed, whatever that looks like. I don't have a confirmation from him yet, but I think I could probably, I've just been texting with him recently. But the goal for that meeting would be to get a better understanding from him about what it is and what it can do, and how we could take the code that he's produced and actually create something in Hood. And then once we do that, then it would be just playing with it, right? To see what those trust lines look like, to see if it's sort of achieves something that makes sense for us, and even porting it over as a sort of an application. How could we distribute this application to other groups, and to see if they use it and how they use it, that kind of thing. If it's not too much of a build process, that is. Does that sound like a plan? Cool. All right. Well, cool. So I'll follow up with him. I don't have anything else on my agenda. So anything else anybody else wanted to chat about on the record before we turn off the camera?
I can answer a question Phonics brought up in chat that I think is interesting for us.
Yeah.
Why are we structuring as a corporation, at least at first, rather than as something more specifically tailored to our potential outcome as like a cooperative? And my intent there was that I don't know that we have a sufficient understanding of our long-term structuring that we're aiming for to afford us having that structure up front. Many different types of legal entities can operate in the ways that we might think of as a cooperative, and reap the benefits thereof. There are maybe some debt and tax benefits that having like cooperative structure from the get-go might have afforded us, but I also don't expect that we'll have like a terrible large amount of income to handle in this first maybe few years even.
Yeah.
And to that end, best that we have the flexibility that is afforded to us from a corporate structure where we can create operating agreements and bylaws that structure us in the way that we might want and that are flexible and also changeable by the originators before we move to a structure that is more like a cooperative where ownership of the company is dictated by the workers and so on. And so therefore the structure. One other thing is that I am a little concerned about having any structure where there's transferability of ownership. And so, because that's sort of, I think, antithetical to what we're trying to do, where ownership, at least in the sense of reaping of benefits, is that's also true. And to your point, Radford, I didn't really do a ton of research on where those entities might be legally available, and I thought, baseline structure is something that's beneficial to us at this point in time. But back to the idea of transferability of ownership, like there's a lot of case law that suggests that you can't really unreasonably restrict transfer of ownership of a company. And so my thinking was we may have to maintain a closely held structure for the actual ownership of the company and structure the benefits layout as we please in the bylaws that identify recipients of benefit through something other than share ownership of the company, if that makes sense. Like something more like employees and less like owners and beneficiaries, because owners can transfer ownership liberally and you can't restrict it meaningfully without running potentially afoul and having those restrictions overridden by the courts if somebody wished to challenge it. So those various factors are kind of what played into my thinking there.
And this kind of makes me think of some of the metaphors we've played with to think about what it is that we're trying to do here. And one of those metaphors that we thought about was like a small town. So like if you could imagine this corporate structure being like a structure, streets and plumbing and electrical lines and that sort of thing, which is owned by the the people who maintain it and keep it running and working. But then the people who live there own their homes. They own the land that those homes are on. They own all kinds of assets in those houses. They go to work. They have, currency. They maybe even collectively own shared spaces like playgrounds and some other things. Maybe not. I don't know. It's not a full blown metaphor exactly, but it could be something similar to that, right? Like where there's a small group that stewards is probably a better word for it. Ownership under certain circumstances, meaning they don't necessarily always do, but at some point they do steward the organizational structure that allows everybody to share in collective ownership of the things that the organization produces. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Or at least that's directionally where I'm thinking.
And like I say, we have the liberty with a very basic structure to revisit that, but also the closely held control to make sure that that doesn't so long as we trust each other. I mean, if we wanted to, we could divest our stock to somebody who could then take it over, but that's, The goal is that
I'm selling. I'm selling. If you let me on, I'll sell all mine to Curtis Yavin. Just saying.
Thanks.
I mean, I wouldn't mind being associated with him, and you know.
By the way, Rebsef, thank you. That was a very thorough explanation. So that's what I was looking for.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that we could. I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think that there were probably attorneys who would have more comprehensive understanding and more experience that we may need to visit with in future. But that's sort of the idea: is give us a platform to start. If we have to move our interests, we can always sell our company to ourselves in a new structure at some later date. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Anything else anybody wanted to bring up for our recorded session?
No, nothing for me.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Thanks, everybody, and please stick around for the unofficial part.